Have you ever looked at your phone at exactly 11:11? Maybe you didn't think much about it the first time. You just checked the time and moved on. But then, a few days later, you see 11:11 again. And then you notice 111 on a receipt. A few days later, maybe you see the same number on a car plate or somewhere completely random. At some point, you start asking yourself, why do I keep seeing this number? And honestly, that's where things get interesting, because there are two very different ways to look at repeating numbers. One way is simple psychology. Our brain is always looking for patterns. Once a certain number catches our attention, we become much more likely to notice it again. Think about it. You decide that you want to buy a particular car. Before that, you probably saw the same model many times without giving it any attention. But once you start thinking about buying it, suddenly that car seems to be everywhere. Did the number of those cars suddenly increase? Of course not. You simply started noticing something that was already around you. The same thing can happen with numbers. But here's the part that makes people curious. Why does one particular number become important to us in the first place? Maybe you're going through a difficult period. Maybe you're waiting for an important decision. Maybe you're thinking about changing something in your life. And during that time, you suddenly start noticing the same number again and again. Okay, but does that number actually mean something? That's the question most people want answered. In numerology, repeating numbers are often given symbolic meanings. Different numbers are connected with different ideas, such as change, balance, new beginnings, growth, or completion. But we should be careful here. Seeing 1111 doesn't mean something is guaranteed to happen. Seeing 555 doesn't mean your life is definitely going to change tomorrow. And seeing 888 doesn't automatically mean money is coming your way. Those are interpretations, not promises. What makes the subject interesting is something much simpler. The number can make you stop for a moment and think about your own life. Maybe you're thinking about starting something new. Maybe you've wanted to start a business. Maybe you've been thinking about learning a new skill. Maybe you've been planning to make a change, but you've kept putting it off. Then one day, you look at your phone and see 1111. You might immediately think, is this a sign? Maybe. Or maybe your brain simply noticed the number because you've already been thinking about change. But instead of trying to prove whether the number is a message or a coincidence, ask yourself something else. Why am I thinking about this change so much? That's a much more useful question, because sometimes we spend so much time trying to understand the number that we forget to understand ourselves. And this is where repeating numbers become interesting. They don't necessarily have to tell you what is going to happen. Sometimes they simply make you pay attention to what is already happening. Maybe that's why you notice 111 when you're thinking about a new beginning. Maybe you notice 222 when you're struggling to find balance. Maybe 555 catches your attention during a period when everything around you seems to be changing. The number itself may not be changing your life, but the moment you notice it can make you stop and look at your life differently. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Because each repeating number is given its own meaning in numerology. And once you understand those meanings, you may start looking at the numbers you keep seeing in a completely different way. Okay, but what if it's not just one number? What do you mean? I mean, sometimes I keep seeing the same number everywhere, on my phone, on receipts, on the clock, and after a while it starts to feel strange. I know exactly what you mean. The first time it happens, you probably don't even think about it. Right, you see 1111 once and forget about it. Then you see it again the next day, and then again. Exactly. And suddenly you start wondering, why do I keep noticing this? But here's where it gets interesting. Repeating numbers don't always have to mean something dramatic. Sometimes your brain simply becomes more aware of a pattern after you notice it once. So you're saying it could just be coincidence? It could be. But there's another side to it too. What side? The meaning you personally give to that number. Explain that. Think about it this way. Imagine you keep seeing the number 11. At first, it means nothing to you. But then, something important happens in your life around the same time. Maybe you're thinking about changing your job. Maybe you're starting over after a difficult period. Maybe you're simply asking yourself what you really want next. So the number becomes connected to that moment. Exactly. And every time you see it again, it reminds you of that thought. That actually makes sense. And this is why repeating numbers can become so interesting. The number itself may not be telling you what to do. Instead, it can make you stop for a moment and look at what is already happening in your life. So instead of asking, what does this number predict, I should ask, what was I thinking about when I saw it?
That's a much better question.
Why? Because sometimes the most useful clue isn't the number, it's your reaction to the number. So if I suddenly feel curious, hopeful, or even worried when I see it, then pay attention to that feeling. It might tell you more about yourself than the number ever could. And what if the same number keeps appearing for weeks? Then don't rush to assume it means something supernatural. Just start noticing the pattern. Noticing what? When it appears, where you are, what you're thinking about, and how you feel at that exact moment. Basically, keep track of the moment instead of just the number. Exactly, because sometimes the real message isn't hidden inside the number. It's hidden inside you.
Okay, but what am I actually supposed to do when I keep seeing the same number? Honestly, you don't have to do anything immediately. Really? Really? I think the first thing you should do is simply notice it. Just notice it? Yeah. Don't immediately search for an answer, and don't assume something big is about to happen just because you saw a certain number. But if it keeps happening, wouldn't you want to know why? Of course, I'd be curious too. But there's a difference between being curious and letting the number decide what you believe. Okay, so what should I look at? Look at yourself first. What do you mean? Think about what was going on in your mind right before you noticed the number. So, for example, if I see 1111 while I'm thinking about a decision, exactly, that's worth noticing. Like, what kind of decision? Maybe you're thinking about changing your job. Maybe you're wondering whether to start something new. Maybe you're thinking about someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. Or maybe I'm just worried about something. Exactly. All of those things matter because they tell you what was already on your mind. So I should pay attention to my thoughts before I pay attention to the number? That's what I'd do. That's interesting. And you can even write it down. Why write it down? Because one moment is easy to forget. You might see 1111 today and remember it clearly. But 3 weeks from now, you probably won't remember what you were thinking about. That's true. So keep a simple record. Like a diary? Nothing that serious. Just a few words. What would I write? Write the date? Write where you were? Write which number you noticed? And then write what was going through your mind at that exact moment. That actually sounds pretty simple. It is. And don't worry if you don't find some huge meaning. But what if I keep seeing the number anyway? Then keep observing it without forcing an explanation. What do you mean by forcing an explanation? Sometimes we see something a few times and immediately want an answer. We start searching for a meaning that might not even be there. So basically, I shouldn't jump to conclusions? Exactly. And I shouldn't let the number control my decisions either. Definitely not. That's important. Very important. A number can make you stop and think, but your decisions should still come from you. So if I'm thinking about changing something in my life, I shouldn't do it just because I saw 1111. Right. Ask yourself why you wanted the change in the first place. And if I still feel the same way after thinking about it, then you have something real to consider. So the number becomes more like a reminder. That's one way to look at it. A reminder to slow down? Exactly. A reminder to pause for a moment and ask yourself what's really going on. And maybe that's why I keep noticing it? Maybe. Or maybe your brain simply became really good at spotting that pattern. So either way, I can use the moment to learn something about myself. Now you're getting it. And I guess that's more useful than trying to predict the future. Much more useful. Because the number might be random, but the thoughts you have when you see it are real. That's actually something I never thought about. Most people don't. They see the number and immediately start looking for an answer outside themselves, instead of looking at what they're already feeling. Exactly. So maybe next time I see 1111, I'll stop for a second instead of immediately wondering what it means. And ask yourself one simple question. What question? What was going through my mind right before I noticed it? That might tell me more than the number itself. Exactly. And sometimes that's where the real story begins. Okay, but what if I've written it down and the same number still keeps showing up? Then you can keep noticing it, but don't let it control you. Why not? Because once we start looking for a pattern, we can notice it much more often. So my brain could actually be making me notice it? Exactly. Think about buying a new car. Before you buy it, you might barely notice that model on the road. And after I buy one, suddenly you see the same car everywhere. That happens to me all the time. Numbers can work in a similar way. Once 1111 becomes important to you, your attention may catch it faster than other numbers. So maybe I was seeing it before, but I just wasn't paying attention? That's possible. But then why does it sometimes feel so personal? Because the moment you notice it can be connected to something you're already thinking about. So the important part may not be the number? Right. The number gets your attention. Your thoughts give the moment its meaning. I like that way of looking at it. And it also keeps you from becoming afraid of every unusual number you see. That's true. I don't want to think something bad is going to happen every time I see 1111. You don't need to. So what should I do instead? Pause for a few seconds.
Ask yourself what you're thinking about, how you're feeling, and what has been happening in your life lately. And then just continue with my day? Exactly. So the number becomes a little reminder to check in with myself. That's one healthy way to look at it. I guess that's more useful than trying to predict the future. Much more useful. And maybe that's why I keep noticing it. Maybe. Sometimes we don't need an answer from the number. We just need to pay attention to ourselves. Okay, but what if I've been seeing the same number for a really long time? That changes the question a little. How? Instead of asking what the number is trying to tell you, ask yourself why this number has become so noticeable to you. So I should look at my own life. Exactly. Give me an example. Let's say you keep seeing 7. Maybe you notice it on the clock, receipts, addresses, or even random numbers online. Okay, now think about what's going on in your life whenever you notice it. Are you worried about something? Are you making a big decision? Or are you thinking about someone from your past? So the number might be connected to a certain period of my life? That's possible. Our minds naturally connect things with memories and emotions. But what if I don't remember what I was thinking? That's okay. You don't have to force an answer. So what should I do? Just notice it. The next time you see the number, stop for a few seconds and ask yourself, what was on my mind just before I noticed this? That's actually pretty simple. Exactly. You don't need to turn every number into a big mystery. And I shouldn't let the number make decisions for me? Definitely not. A number can make you curious, but your choices should still come from you. So maybe the real value is using the moment to understand myself better. That's how I see it. And if the number disappears one day, then let it disappear. Maybe you simply stopped noticing it as much. So I shouldn't be worried if it stops appearing? No, nothing bad has to happen just because you stopped seeing a number. I like that. Good. Because sometimes we're so busy looking for signs outside ourselves that we forget to listen to what we're already feeling inside. Maybe that's what makes repeating numbers so interesting. Exactly. Not because they can predict your future, but because they can make you pause and think about your present.